What is up, people? Welcome back to another episode of Check the Kick podcast. I'm the host, Devin. That's the sign. Sherdog.com is where you can find this show. It's a pretty dope website. If you haven't checked it out, you probably should. Kind of so weekend of fights here. Devin Haney gets a win over Regis Prograis. I actually did not watch that boxing event. Quick little fun story. I live up in the Pacific Northwest, and we got quite a bit of snow this weekend. So instead of watching the fights on Sunday, I wanted to go do a little fishing. I went down to my garage, rigged up all my gear, put my waders on, drove about 40 minutes north of me through some pretty shitty driving conditions, got out, put my pack on, got my hand warmer on, put my gloves on, did all the things, and I realized that I left my fishing rods at home. So then I had to turn around and drive all the way home, and I was pretty upset. So that is what I did on Sunday instead of watching back the boxing event. However, I did catch the UFC event live, and we're just going to go ahead and get straight into it. We're going to pass talking about quite a bit of these fights from the previous UFC Vegas Shanghai card. Song Yadong gets a clean sweep, 50-45s. Chris Gutierrez. What we expect out of men's bantamweight, this wasn't that. It wasn't that great of a fight, but he gets the win. We're here to talk about two fights that I liked, two fights that piqued my interest. Yes, Tatsuro Taira had an amazing win. He is not just a grappler. He did show that against Carlos Hernandez. However, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Khalil Rountree getting a third-round knockout over Anthony Smith. And, you know, you can cue the da-na-na-na-na-na. He had Anthony Smith doing the chicken dance. I really like Anthony Smith, and I did not like to see that. So that was tough to see. Khalil goes out there, and Anthony Smith had the right approach to this. And another reason why I'm not going to spend tons of time talking about this fight card is this next week's pay-per-view event is amazing, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. And I did the breakdown show. I filled in for Keith, and I did the recap show with Mr. Ben Duffy. So we're not going to spend too much time on this. But back to the fight. Anthony Smith had the right game plan going into this. He pressured Khalil. He was landing good shots. Anthony Smith's durability just doesn't seem there anymore. He's tough as shit. There was a moment in the second round where he took a clean straight down the pipe from Khalil Rountree. Maybe it was an overhand. And he was clearly wobbled, and he just reset and got back on the pressure. Whenever he was pressuring, and it was a smart game plan from Smith, a guy that doesn't address leg kicks well and such a great kicker like Rountree. He just got on the forward pressure, and if you crowd the kicker and you take the space away from him, there's really nothing for him to kick. He can't plant his feet and fire kicks. And that's kind of what Smith did. Whenever Smith got off the front foot, whenever he decided to just stay in mid-range and let Khalil Rountree box with him, that's where he had his most trouble. But again, Smith looked great. He was using long, rangy strikes, and he would have probably won a couple rounds. Maybe, you know, I had the fight 2018 going into the third round. However, Smith had great moments. He's just not durable. He just can't take the shots. If this was the Smith coming up to his 205 title shot, he probably would have won this fight. But this dude has just fought so many killers. You know, Johnny Walker, Ryan Spann, John Jones, Glover Teixeira. The beating that Glover Teixeira put on him was legendary. Alexander Gustafsson, Alexander Rakic. This guy's fought so many dudes. The list just goes on and on. His fights against Hector Lombard. Do you remember me now? You know, Anthony Smith has so many great moments. What I liked with Rountree is Rountree was pitter-pattering, and then he would change his speed. That's how we got Anthony in the third round, where he was kind of pitter-pattering. Boom. Anthony Smith threw a leg kick, and Khalil Rountree countered it with an uppercut. Snapped his head back. Smith kind of did a chicken dance. He threw a hook around Smith's guard. That definitely rattled him. He went down. Khalil Rountree is a dude that if you get hurt in front of him and you go to the ground, his ground and pound, and I don't even know if you can call it ground and pound, but like the body kicks, the soccer kicks to the body, if you're on the ground in front of him, he's just such a dangerous guy to be curled up in front of on the ground. And he mercifully, it was like he was holding Thor's hammer in his hand, just way up in the air. And then the ref, Mark Smith, jumps in and stops the fight. Thankfully, there was no more extra damage dished out there, but damn it, there could have been. And Khalil Rountree, he's on, I believe, a 6-fight win streak now. The Jacoby fight, I thought Jacoby won either way. He did enough to get his hand raised there. And now he's got a lot of, I mean, he called out Alex Pereira. I think that could be a fun fight. Probably not going to happen. Some other MMA media members were saying that that could not be a pay-per-view main event. I disagree. We literally watched Amanda Nunes beat up Irene Aldana as a pay-per-view main event. We've seen Amanda Nunes main event at a non-existent division against Felicia Spencer. There's been worse. And it's Alex Pereira, Khalil Rountree. That's violence. I could totally see that being a pay-per-view headliner if you throw, maybe a flyweight title fight under it, or a women's flyweight or a women's strawweight title fight. Totally could be a headliner. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I think Khalil Rountree should have, instead of called out Alex Pereira, he should have said, I have a plan. My plan is to fill in short notice and fight Alexander Rakic. I know you're looking for a fight. Jan Blachowicz just pulled out. So give me Alexander Rakic. I'm going to go knock out Alexander Rakic, and then I'm coming for you, Alex Pereira. That is probably what should have came out of Khalil Rountree's mouth. Again, he's an emotional dude that wears his heart on his sleeve. He cried like 5 times between the post-fight interview in the cage and the press conference alone. So who knows? Again, calling for Pereira would be a fun fight. Unfortunately for Khalil Rountree, the fights in between him and Pereira are probably not that favorable. Like Alexander Rakic is a giant dude. He's probably everybody talks about how big Johnny Walker is, but I think Alexander Rakic kind of gets forgotten about. He's fucking giant. He's 6'5" as well. He's huge. And unlike Johnny Walker, who also knocked out Khalil Rountree, Alexander Rakic likes to wrestle. And still nobody has wrestled Rountree. I'm surprised Smith's not a good wrestler, but he's a good grappler. He's got good submission wins. He submitted Alexander Gustafsson, submitted Volkan Oezdemir, but surprised he didn't really try to get anything going. Again, this is a short notice fight for Anthony Smith as well. Hopefully he got paid for it. You look at guys like Jan Blachowicz, Jan Blachowicz is probably a sneaky, really tough fight for someone like Khalil Rountree too. Someone that can, address his kicks and is a good, sharp boxer with big power, and that can also grapple and has a wrestling game. Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker are rematching again. Ben Duffy, my Sherdog colleague here, said this so eloquently, and I use this over and over again. Magomed Ankalaev is the type of dude that walks across the street. He'll cross the street to go step in dog shit. So I just can't trust him. But I do like Khalil Rountree fighting probably the loser of that fight. So whether it's a Johnny Walker rematch, which is probable, Johnny Walker rematch, or if Ankalaev gets beat by Walker somehow, that totally makes sense. All I know is that the dude should not be fighting at the Apex anymore. He's violent. He likes to hurt people. He's huge. He's got a hell of a highlight reel. I think those Marcin Prachnio fights are behind him. Curious to see what the UFC does with him next. But I think Rakic, or the loser of the Walker Ankalaev fight, makes the most sense. And then if he goes out there, say he gets a rematch with Johnny Walker and knocks his head off. It's 205. Jamal Hill can't get his shit together. The dude's out there eating his weight in chocolate and assaulting his brother. This is the perfect time. Hopefully he gets a short notice turnaround. Maybe he can get on a main card somewhere, or even in front of a live audience. That'd be dope. Big things in the future for Khalil Rountree and a kind of wide open division. Moving on to Steve Garcia getting an impressive win over Melquizael Costa, Melky Costa. We're going to call him Melky. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you guys about this fight, because I'm a low-key Steve Garcia fan. He's in the same place as Iron Turtle Jung Young Park, who kind of got robbed and kind of got shafted. The judging on this card, we had Stephanie Egger kind of get shafted, maybe, even though that fight should have just been a draw, and they throw that away in the outside trash. The first fight, the Alencar fight, she definitely versus Amanda. Alencar probably lost that fight, and then Iron Turtle kind of probably got shafted there. But you know who got really shafted? Steve Garcia out of a $50,000 performance bonus. A bunch of people that finished on this card. Park that defeated Shannon Ross in the second round. Shannon Ross is a guy that only has knockout losses in the UFC. And Melky is a good fighter. Like, Melky is a much better fighter than Shannon Ross will ever be. And Steve Garcia goes out there and gets kind of, grinded against the cage, gets out wrestled or now grappled for the first round. And then Steve Garcia, he had both Greg Jackson and Winklejohn in his corner. So that should tell you how much of an OG the dude is. And when Steve Garcia hopped on the scene in the UFC, I never thought he was going to be anything. I was like, this guy stinks. Turns out I was wrong, and I'm happy to be wrong. I love his tough, just blue-collar style. In the pocket, he has been venomous. He's hurt tons and tons of dudes in the pocket. You go look through his most recent fights, and he's hurting everybody. Look what he did to Chase Hooper. Look what he did to Melky Costa. The dude had to pull out last week because he got a weight cut sickness, got ill, something happened, food poisoning, weight cut sickness, some shit went down. So they have rescheduled this a week later. This was supposed to be live in front of everybody in Austin. I guarantee if this would have been live in front of everybody in Austin, he would have got some money. And maybe the UFC is just kind of, throwing a little shade at him for making this fight have to come in at 155 instead of 45 and the short notice BS. Maybe he's like, hey, maybe the UFC is thinking you caused us a headache. So, yeah, you won by knockout, but we don't give a shit. This knockout, knee, and then a big hook around the guard, and then a bunch of ground and pound, and then Melky Costa sticking to the game plan. But instead of wrestling Steve Garcia, he was wrestling Chris Taglioni for a long time. Like a long fucking time. I haven't seen someone wrestle, and I forget who said this, but it's like Melky was like looking for spare change in Chris Taglioni's back pocket. That's how deep he was in on the legs there. At least this wasn't like some Russian MMA organization where they would have been throwing down elbows or put him in a guillotine. Either way, Steve Garcia looked great here. He looks violent. He called out Nate Landwehr, and that's the fight. Like he did better matchmaking than any of us could. That's the fight to make. Steve Garcia, Nate Landwehr, Steve Garcia. What I hate when the UFC does this is they give you these sob stories. They make you get attached to these fighters. They're talking about how his stepdaughter has some sort of severe illness, and he fights for her so he can help pay for her medical stuff. And then he goes out there and just fucking detonates somebody as an underdog again. Steve Garcia, when he's an underdog, you bet him. Goes out there and finishes someone again, and they just don't throw a dog a bone. But hungry dogs run faster. That's probably what happened there with him. Yeah, this card was not the best. We talked about Tatsuro Taira. That was a pretty dope finish there. Kevin just said beats Song Kinan. Nasrat Haqparast. The finish he got over Jamie Malarkey was just violent. Those hockey punches in the clinch fucking made Jamie Malarkey literally start to rise like this. We had Tim Elliott also turn Sumadurgi into a porpoise. Go watch the finish of that fight. Tim Elliott took this fight on short notice. They went up a weight class. He took this dude down, pancaked him, got him in a head and arm triangle and head and arm choke, and then squeezed Sumadurgi's head off. And that's another submission loss for Sumadurgi. Great win by Tim Elliott. That's it for this card, guys. We're going to go ahead and move on to the juicy shit. I got UFC 296. It's the final card of the year. I'm stoked to talk about it. There's more fights on this card that I want to talk about than I can even talk to you guys about. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, guys. Big pay-per-view event. This card is just, the card's really, really good. I wish I could break down it all for you. It's so good that Randy Brown is opening up against Muslim Salikov. Like, that's the opener. We got Andre Fili versus Lucas Almeida. We've got Tagir Ulanbekov versus Cody Durden. Unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about that one, but circle that as like potential fight of the night. Flyweights are always dope. Cody Garbrandt returns. Casey O'Neill is back. Brian Kelleher is back. He's fighting Cody Garbrandt. Yeah, unfortunately, we have a women's bantamweight fight. However, Irina Aldana is making her comeback after her embarrassing loss to Amanda Nunes. We'll see what she looks like. Just so many great fights on this card. It's just so many great fights on this card. Just the card's amazing. I hope everyone makes weight. I hope we don't have any issues. I hope we get to see this whole thing from start to finish. First fight we're going to talk about. We have Josh Emmett fighting the short notice replacement for Giga Chikadze. He's facing Bryce Mitchell. Odds on this fight. Bryce Mitchell's a 2-1 favorite. Minus 210 for Bryce Mitchell. Emmett coming back at plus 162. I should have probably pulled the odds because I'm curious now to see who the favorite was going into the Chikadze fight. I bet you would have been Giga. We got Bryce Mitchell, 16-1. His only pro loss, however, he does have losses. He did lose on the Ultimate Fighter. He did get finished by Brad Katona. That was back on the Ultimate Fighter, and that just does not count on the pro record, apparently. His one loss was a pretty brutal finish to Ilia Topuria, but that dude is an amazing talent, and he's about to be fighting for a title, and he might win that title. Josh Emmett, on the other hand, he's got a 18-4 record. Unfortunately, he's coming off of 2 losses that were pretty bad. Yair Rodriguez, he's a phenom. He kind of, beat the shit out of Josh Emmett, but Josh Emmett did have his moments. And then Ilia Topuria scoring one of the only 10-7 rounds in recent memory. Did not finish Josh Emmett, but a complete boxing outclassing by Ilia Topuria. Josh Emmett is a guy that, you look back at his fights, look how he knocked out Michael Johnson, look how he beat Mirsad Bektic, the win against Shane Burgos, the win against Dan Ige, the win against Calvin Kattar, which was a war. The dude's got good wins over Scott Holtzman. He did lose via split decision to Desmond Green. The worst loss on his record, in my opinion, is probably that loss to Josh Emmett. When I say worst losses, I mean just the shit kicking where he took off a whole year. He got a bunch of facial reconstructive surgery. And he, that's just something that takes a lot out of you. He's 38 years old as well. Bryce Mitchell, his previous fight was against Dan Ige, where he took the Bible from the hospital and screamed freedom. These are my notes, but he screamed freedom with the Bible over his head and kind of won a decision he probably shouldn't have against Dan Ige. Prior to that was that Ilia Topuria fight. He looked really fucking good against Edson Barbosa. He looked really fucking good against Andre Fili. He looked really good against Charles Rosa. He got that twister out against Matt Sales. Bryce Mitchell's a dude that's really good. His striking kind of gets slept on a little bit, and I think his striking is so successful just because his grappling is just at such a high level. Unconventional takedowns from a guy that is a wrestler / grappler, but if you look through his previous history before getting into MMA, it's not like this dude was some all-American, D1 wrestler. He's a dude that's from Arkansas. He's a hardworking dude. You remove all of his outside cage antics. 1 minute he's talking about infrastructures in the community he lives in, and we're not talking about his political views. We're talking about his fighting skills, and he's a good fighter. Great back takes, great control, great submissions, good striking, great body kicks. Bryce Mitchell's a great body kicker. He will spam the shit out of body kicks, and he does it because he's not worried about getting taken down. Josh Emmett, on the other hand, at 38 years old, he's really not wrestling anymore. He's got good takedown defense, but his offensive wrestling is just kind of non-existent. Typical what you'd expect from an MMA fighter that starts as a wrestler that has big power in his hands. Pretty good hand speed. That's probably declined. However, he did buzz Yair in that fight. And I wouldn't say he had moments against Topuria, but was able to hold his own enough to not get finished against like a phenom in Topuria who could end up being like some sort of generational talent. Ilia Topuria may be the next Volkanovski, maybe the next Max Holloway. So no shame on that. If you look at Bryce Mitchell's fight with Dan Ige and you know how to score an MMA fight, in my opinion, this isn't right. This is my opinion. He did a lot of control and not a lot of damage in that fight. And the moments that it was on the feet, Dan Ige had a lot of success. I could totally see this fight looking just like the Dan Ige fight. And I'm just not sure how that's going to get scored. I don't think Bryce Mitchell's going to go out there on short notice and finish Josh Emmett. What worries me is Bryce Mitchell on short notice may go out there and, try to unload everything. And what happens if this fight does start a third round? Josh Emmett is dangerous. Josh Emmett is tough as fuck. Look at his Ilia Topuria fight, going for it in the 5th round. Look at his fight with Yair. He goes for it. Win, lose, or draw, the dude goes for it. If Bryce hangs out in the pocket with Josh Emmett, Bryce does not have good head movement. He has terrible striking defense. He's going to get clipped. My thing is Josh Emmett's 38 years old. And you're already, he's an amazing athlete, and that's what's carried him, and that's why he's still able to fight at 38 years old this high level. He's got that little bit of Yoel Romero in him. However, I mean, Yoel Romero's it's probably the most athletic freak that's ever fought in MMA, but Josh Emmett's got a little bit of that. Unfortunately, this is not middleweight. This is featherweight. And at 145, it's like you're driving a car down the road, one loose screw and everything just starts freaking falling apart. I'm very torn on this. Because if Josh Emmett hits harder, he's more dangerous than Dan Ige. And he's probably just as durable. And Bryce Mitchell isn't enough of a striking threat to probably hurt him on the feet. But now that I say that, watch Bryce Mitchell go out there and liver kick him with I could see Bryce Mitchell really just spamming body kicks and giving Josh Emmett a lot of trouble. But if Josh Emmett can defend some takedowns and have, 2 minutes of striking each round, he could totally win this fight. What a lot of people need to realize when looking at fights, picking fights, handicapping fights, analyzing fights is we have to realize that judges don't always score fights properly based off the current MMA scoring criteria. Bryce Mitchell's last fight is probably a pretty clear case of that. And the way that MMA is judged, unfortunately, typically whoever wins the last half of the round ends up winning that fight or winning that round. So say Josh Emmett goes out there, has tons of success with his boxing, maybe doesn't drop Bryce, but lumps him up, gets his nose bloody, has success for 2 minutes, and then gets taken down and controlled for 3. Even though technically Josh Emmett's supposed to win a round like that, say Bryce Mitchell gets back control for 2.5 minutes after losing all the striking, judges will probably give that to Bryce. So you just have to, look at Andre Muniz and Jung Young Park from last weekend. Jung Young Park did all the damage and still lost that fight just because Andre Muniz had the control. Now, and it's one of those things where whenever there's a close fight, you can almost give it to whoever won the clear round. In that case, last week, Andre Muniz clearly won the second round, and the first and third were close. I wouldn't say they're toss-ups. I think Park probably should have won the fight. Either way, back to this fight here. My heart says Josh Emmett, and my mind says Bryce Mitchell. And since I'm not gambling on this fight, I'm going to pick Josh Emmett to do the same thing Dan Ige did. If he sticks to the same game plan, and can maybe clip Mitchell up a little bit more and really get on the front foot and really let his hands go, I could see him hurting Mitchell. Topuria hurt Mitchell. Josh Emmett is not the same boxer as Topuria, but equally powerful. And Bryce Mitchell could easily just take him down, take his back, ride him for 2 rounds, and get a submission in the 3rd. But I'm trying to will this into existence because I'd love to see a 38-year-old guy win a fight. And I'm not too mad watching Bryce Mitchell lose a fight either, if you know what I mean. Give me Josh Emmett as the plus 210 dog here. Sorry, the plus 162 underdog. But I don't feel good about it. Don't feel good about it at all. Moving on. We're taking a big step up the card here. And I'm not going to discuss the Tony Ferguson Paddy Pimblett fight. I'm pretty sure every single person listening to this podcast wants Paddy Pimblett to lose and wants Tony Ferguson to win. Tony Ferguson is on a hellish losing streak, and when he fought Bobby Green last time out, I made it a point to say this is probably the last time I'm going to cover and break down a Tony Ferguson fight. And I may regret not breaking this one down, especially if Tony Ferguson is able to pull the rabbit out of the hat, per se. But I don't see Tony winning, and it'll break my heart to watch this guy lose another fight for what is like 6 times in a row. So we're not going to talk about that, but put me down for rooting for Tony. I'm not picking it, but Team Tony Ferguson here. We're rooting for El Kukui. The fight that is probably sneakily become the most, I don't want to say important, but the most viewed fight, the most talked about, the dude that's definitely getting the most attention on this card. This guy for the past 2 weeks has been getting more attention than the main event fighters combined, which is crazy. But we got Garry taking on his ex-training partner in Vicente Luque. Got Vicente Luque with a 22-9 record, fighting the perfect 13-0 Garry. Odds on that. Garry's a big favorite, minus 375. We got Luque representing Keelcliff coming back at plus 280. Garry is a guy that has played hot potato with his training camps. It looks like he was down in Brazil with Diego Lima and Shuto Box. He's going to be rocking the yellow shorts, supposedly. Identity crisis would probably be not the best term to use for Garry, but maybe close to accurate. This guy's got a lot of shit going on in his life, saying he doesn't feel safe bringing his family to Vegas. I think that is probably a little bit of an attention-seeking reach, in my opinion. And I won't get too into the weeds, but when you kind of grab the baton and run with it, what he did to Neil Magny with the, child thing where he said Neil Magny beats up his kids, and then supposedly Neil Magny had issues with like child protective services after that, which was just like a big time false accusation, all because Neil Magny said, "I'll beat you like you're my son." And then the thing with Jeff Neal putting his mugshot on a t-shirt. It's one of those things where, he's got the similar thing to Israel Adesanya where something happens. There's a lot of the fan base doesn't like them already. And then something happens with this case, the whole thing with Garry's wife. The people that don't like him will take it and just run. And that's what's happened here. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on, a lot of stuff going on for Garry outside of the cage. Also, too, what really capped it off was Vicente Luque posting that picture about his baptism. And then Garry, saying the only God you're going to meet is me in the cage or something along those lines. I don't want to quote it exactly because I'm going to be wrong, but distasteful to say the least. Shitty. Kind of a shitty personality trait by Mr. Garry, in my opinion. You don't want to, you could have commented that on any picture, but his baptism, and this is a dude that they were like super cordial. They even had like a video call that they were talking to each other, saying nothing but respect going into this fight. How the tables have churned. video got released of Ian Garry's wife helping him make his Jeff Neal t-shirt. You kind of have to assume she might be in his ear for this. That ain't my business, though. What my business is the fight business, and we're here to talk about the fight. Vicente Luque, man, there's a lot of shit surrounding this guy, too. The dude had a brain bleed after his Jeff Neal fight. He got kind of shit kicked so bad, and then he came back and fought RDA his last time out, and kind of proved to RDA that divisions are there for a reason, and you're not going to be able to out-grapple me. It's kind of interesting because going into that fight with RDA, most people thought, hey, Vicente needs to avoid the grappling, and he needs to strike with RDA, and RDA needs to grapple and not strike with Luque, where it kind of turned out that RDA had, his success in the grappling in the striking, and Luque had his success in the grappling. Before that, he got beat up real bad by Jeff Neal, real bad, so bad that he had to take a whole year off, a year and like 6 days off, and he had a brain bleed. And I mean, you just don't like to see guys fighting after they have stuff like that happen. But keep in mind that in 2023 with modern technology, how many people do you think 30, 40 years ago were getting brain bleeds in boxing and nobody would know about, and they would just go home and die? He lost to Bilal Muhammad. Prior to that, he had double Bravo chokes. That win against Michael Chiesa was a good win. That was back in 2021, unfortunately. And then before that, that Bravo choke against Tyron Woodley, I remember exactly where I was. I was actually driving. I was in the Targhee National Forest, just outside of Yellowstone National Park, way up in the mountains, driving through the snow, driving from Yellowstone, Montana to Island Park, Idaho, with about a 24-ounce bison ribeye on my lap, picking it up from this super sketchy bar in Yellowstone, Montana. Interesting story. If you guys care to hear the rest, shoot me a DM and I'll tell you. Vicente Luque, prior to his loss to Bilal Muhammad and his loss to Jeff Neal, he got beat up by Wonder Boy, but he had a split decision with Mike Perry. I think Mike Perry beat him, but the finish over Nico Price, great. The knockout over Randy Brown, great. That club and sub over Tyron Woodley, great. The Bravo choke over Michael Chiesa, great. With Ian Garry, this dude just head kicked D-Rod, who is no longer suspended on PEDs, and he said, hey, I'm going to go out there and kick D-Rod. After that, he went out there and kind of just washed Neil Magny, forced Neil Magny on the back foot, crushed him with leg kicks. The Song Kianon fight was a good fight. He did get buzzed and hurt real bad. Before that, his fight with Gabe Green and his fight with Darian Weeks were probably a lot closer than they should have been. He also kind of got buzzed up by Jordan Williams, but he's a young kid, man. He's 26 now. Those two fights were back in 2021, so he was 24 at the time. Irish kid, big for the division, kind of long torso but shorter arms. He's really fast. He throws straight punches. He's good at getting in and out. He seems to be well coached. This is just kind of a torch pass fight, in my opinion. I think Luque is just way too hittable. Now, is Ian Garry the most durable, and is Ian Garry a bulletproof guy? No. You could look at all of his fights. He had a very close fight with Gabe Green. He got nearly finished by Song Kianon. Jordan Williams, even though he knocked out Jordan Williams buzzed him up too. But Luque, man, the brain bleed, the way he looked against RDA, the way he looked against Bilal Muhammad in the rematch where he just couldn't catch him. Bilal has good footwork, but I could just see Ian Garry pot shotting, skirting around the outside of the octagon, leaping into the pocket, landing clean 1-2s straight down the pike, getting out, circling, landing. I think that's how this fight is going to be fought. It's probably going to look exactly opposite like the Neil Magny fight. I don't see him pressuring Luque because Luque has good kicks and good power. Could Luque crack him like Song Kianon did, cause Ian Garry to start panic wrestling and then freaking lock up a Bravo choke? Yes. Vicente Luque has a venomous front headlock game. The dude has a front headlock game like a flyweight. If you try to scramble with him, he will squeeze your head off, and he's a fucking good scrambler. I would not also be surprised. Ian Garry is a good good grappler. That's kind of, over in Cage Warriors, that was kind of his thing. He could grapple, but in the UFC, he hasn't really been doing that. I don't know if I'd be surprised if Luque came out and tried to grapple, but he's more of an opportunistic guy. He just takes too much damage. He's really defensively porous, and Luque's pretty slow, and Ian Garry's fast and athletic. Would I like to see Luque win this fight? I'm not supposed to favor fighters, but yes, I actually would. Just for Ian Garry's story and for Vicente Luque. Honestly, it just all amounts down to the one baptism post. I feel like Ian Garry kind of deserves to get his ass kicked for doing something like that. But that's just my opinion. But Ian Garry's going to win this fight. I see him skirting around the outside of the cage, landing leg kicks, getting into the pocket, landing a clean 1-2, popping Luque with the jab, stand on the outside, using his footwork, stand on his bike. And I don't want to say coasting to a decision, but I don't think he's going to finish Luque here. I think he's going to play it safe. They did train together. They probably had some sparring rounds together. Word got out that Shavkat knocked him out in training. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll see what happens after this fight. I'm curious to see if Garry wins, what he's going to say on the mic. Regardless of a decision or knockout, they're not going to do the speed up, get the next fight going. If Ian Garry wins this fight, if it's a snoozer for 15 minutes, the UFC is going to put a microphone in his face. So I'm curious to see what happens. Give me Ian Garry. Give me Ian Garry by decision here, but I'm rooting for Luque. All right, moving on to the next fight we're going to talk about here. We have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fighting Shavkat Rakhmonov. Rakhmonov is a big favorite here. He's a minus 600. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson coming back at plus 425. And we all know who these guys are. Stephen Thompson, 17 wins, 6 losses. Shavkat Rakhmonov, perfect 17-0. Stephen Thompson's last time out, he looked really good against Kevin Holland. But it's Kevin Holland. He kind of just shit kicked Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland did hurt his hand, but it got to the point where anybody that goes tit for tat striking only with Stephen Thompson is going to have a lot of issues. Ask Robert Whittaker. Ask Jeff Neal. Ask Vicente Luque. Ask Jorge Masvidal. Ask Johnny Hendricks. This dude went on a hell of a run up to his title fights with Tyron Woodley. And he's been around the UFC forever. Shavkat Rakhmonov, he's looked great. The dude is coming off of a pretty long layoff for someone that, did look so great earlier this year. His last fight was against Jeff Neal. That was on March 4th of 23, where he won via standing. Sherdog has it as a submission, a rear naked choke, but it was definitely more of like a standing bulldog choke where he just kind of took his back, but at an angle, and then just reach his arm around. And Jeff Neal did not realize that he was in trouble until he was in trouble. Prior to that, he really beat the shit out of Neil Magny. And then that spinning hook kick Carlson Harris was awesome. Michel Prazeres was a pretty dope win. And then that win against Alex Oliveira to get into the UFC was awesome. I did not like how much Jeff Neal had success with his straight punches against Shavkat Rakhmonov. But when you break down this fight, you got to look at Stephen Thompson's fights with Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad, his last 2 losses. Yes, those are back in 21, but especially against Bilal Muhammad, who is not as big as Shavkat Rakhmonov, who's probably just as good of a wrestler, but definitely not as athletic either as Shavkat. Bilal Muhammad was able to just go out there and completely out grapple Wonderboy. Wonderboy is an amazing striker. We all know about his striking style. He kind of stands very bladed, will leap in and out of the pocket. He throws good straight punches. He's got an arsenal of kicks that he throws. Good leg kicks, good body kicks, great head kicks, spinning hook kicks, spinning wheel kicks, crescent kicks, axe kicks. This guy can do it all. Shavkat is definitely a dude that keeps his head up and down with the striking, and Jeff Neal has an amazing straight left out of the southpaw and was continuously ringing Shavkat's bell. I could see Shavkat coming out here and striking with Wonderboy and maybe even getting clipped up a little bit, but I don't think Wonderboy has that one-shot power to finish someone as durable as Shavkat Rakhmonov. The odds are the way they are for a reason. You remove everything. You remove everything from the fight, and it's basically a guy that can do it all versus a guy that's a striker. Wonderboy, his takedown defense used to be amazing, but that's something that has declined. Gilbert Burns is an amazing wrestler and grappler. Bilal Muhammad is also an amazing wrestler, grappler. Wonderboy is just getting older. You know, he's 40 years old, fighting at 170, fighting Shavkat Rakhmonov. And I think this is his repayment for pulling out of the Michel Pereira fight and not taking it when Michel Pereira missed weight. The UFC goes, well, you don't want to fight Michel Pereira? We'll give you Shavkat Rakhmonov. This is definitely another passing of the torch. And this whole entire card is got tons of passing of the torch fights. You look up and down the whole thing, and Tony Ferguson, Paddy Pimblett, you know, Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell, Luque versus Ian Garry, Shavkat versus Wonderboy. These are not two contenders. This is one contender that's kind of, you know, emerging, fighting an old dog that was maybe a close to title challenger. In Wonderboy's case, was a title challenger multiple times. I'm going to go with Shavkat Rakhmonov here, but I don't think it comes that easy if he decides to strike with Wonderboy. I say he strikes with Wonderboy for the first half of the first round, maybe gets clipped up a little bit more than he likes to. Again, Shavkat, that is his biggest deficiency. He is very defensively porous, but he's tough as fuck. The dude literally wears a coyote on his head. He's going to go down. He's going to take Wonderboy down, and he's probably going to submit him. Give me Shavkat Rakhmonov by second round submission. All right, guys. We're almost there. Co-main event. A rematch at men's flyweight. We have the Raw Dog, Brandon Royval, versus the Cannibal, Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja is a -175 favorite. We got Royval coming back as a +145 dog. Pretty close line for a guy that got finished via rear naked choke in their last fight. These are, I mean, there's so many crazy scrambly flyweights, but these are probably of the two most no hold barred, just scrambling. This fight will look like two stray cats locked in a dumpster fighting over a can of tuna. That's what this fight's going to look like. Royval is a long, lengthy guy. He's definitely tall and long for the division. He's a damn good scrambler. He's opportunistic. He is tough as fuck. This dude has taken tons of damage. Look at the Kai Kara-France fight where he took a big shot, landed a spinning back elbow, knocked down and finished his Kai Kara-France. Pantoja is the same way. Close fight with Brandon Moreno in a rematch his last time out, but defeated him again. And this dude is a back-taking specialist. If he may have the best back-taking game in the UFC, it's kind of similar to Aljamain's, but even more high velocity and more power. He's a venomous boxer in the pocket. He will put his chin on the line and go to war with people in the pocket. Not the most defensively sound dude, but definitely very, very tough. And really the only dude that's been able to brawl with him in the pocket, Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo. Two generational talents, two of the best flyweights ever. Royval looked really good, and he's been on a great run. He's always been just a whirling dervish of offense and scrambles, but he's really starting to kind of, you know, get his shit together, for lack of better terms. Like that knee that he hit on Mateus Nicolau, the way he set that knee up the middle and then those elbows. Nicolau is a dude that is super buttoned up and well put together. That was an impressive win against Nicolau. The guillotine choke over Matt Schnell, the win over Bontarine was a very close fight, and that was kind of his first fight back after he lost to Pantoja. The finish to Brandon Moreno was kind of more of like a TKO injury where his shoulder popped out of place. The dude arm triangle Tim Elliott, like in his UFC debut. That's a good win. Like Tim Elliott's record may not look great if you look at the numbers, but Tim Elliott is very fucking good. Ask Sumaderji about that. Yeah, this fight, this is an incredible fight. Both of these guys have fought the who's who. Pantoja, in his last 4 fights, he beat Manal Kape, he beat Brandon Royval, he beat Alex Perez, and he beat Brandon Moreno. Like, Brandon Royval is about to fight for a title. Alex Perez did fight for a title. Brandon Moreno fought for a title a million times, 5 times. Matt Schnell is a great win. He knocked him out. Knocked out Wilson Hayes. That's a good win. This dude's been in the UFC forever. This is a really, really tough fight to call. I think Alexandre Pantoja's game, I don't know whose game is more venomous, to be honest. I think Pantoja always has that back take game in his back pocket. But I think Royval, if you look at their first fight, 2 of the judges scored it for Pantoja. 1 of the judges scored the first round for Royval. That goes to show you how close of a fight it is. It was the first time out. But, man, Pantoja takes anyone's back, and it is a wrap. For the sake of the division, it's probably best if Pantoja wins. We got Brandon Moreno weighing in as a backup here. And if Brandon Royval wins with the state of this division, they're going to have a third fight, and I would not be mad at it. Any of these dudes, you've put their names in a hat, draw 2, and it's a fucking awesome fight. Brandon Royval could take advantage of Alexandre Pantoja's willingness to just enter the pocket and bite down. Pantoja is not the youngest dude. He's 33, but he's been fighting forever, especially in this division. He's so damn tough, but I could totally see Royval trains at elevation. I could totally see Royval. Pace is not a problem for either one of these two guys, but Royval's long, lengthy strikes, I could see him fighting a little bit more of a nip-tuck fight here. He's durable enough to take Pantoja's best shots. And I could see him kind of, using straight, long weapons and mixing in those knees and mixing in push and teep kicks to kind of, kill the distance and make them exit the pocket again. God, I'm so torn on this one, guys. I don't know. Give me Brandon Royval to win a highly contested decision where he may hurt him here and he may have his back taken. But again, Pantoja can take anyone's back, and he's tough enough to walk forward, take your best shots. And if he gets you against the cage, his back take game, I mean, you when it comes to back-taking specialists, you put him next to guys like Patchy Mix. You put him next to guys like Aljamain Sterling, and he may be better than both of them. He is that good. But I think Brandon Royval, if he fights a smart fight, this is still winnable for him. He is good enough. He has all the tools. You look at his record, he's got tons of submissions as well. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's his bread and butter. He's tall, long, and lanky, but he's also a really dangerous striker. He's more of a dynamic striker than Pantoja. Pantoja may be a little more dangerous, but I just think Royval has more tools in the striking. I think as long as he can avoid that back take game from Pantoja, he can win this fight. Give me Royval as a kind of moderate underdog to pull it off, and we'll have a new flyweight champ, and it'll be fun. Fucking awesome fight. You can circle this for best fight on the card. Mark my words. Here it is, guys. Main event. We've got a big fight here. And unfortunately, it'd probably be even more talked about if the Ian Garry thing wasn't happening, but we've got Colby Covington challenging for the welterweight title again. This time he is facing the current champion, Leon Rocky Edwards. Colby Chaos Covington coming in at a small underdog, plus 125. And Leon Edwards is coming in as a small to moderate favorite at -150. Both of these guys have fought the who's who's. Colby's record, 17 wins, 3 losses. Leon Edwards with 21 wins and 3 losses as well. It's going to be a good freaking fight. Leon Edwards is coming off of back-to-back wins over Kamaru Usman. First time against Kamaru Usman was back at Elevation in Salt Lake City. Well, semi-elevation. Where he won via 5th round head kick at the 404 mark. Quit letting them bully you, son, was something that you probably heard in the corner. And he went out there and was no longer bullied. He was also the first guy to really have that much wrestling success against Usman. And that's something that cannot be slept on in a match like this, where he did have that nice, clean, cut the angle, trip takedown, and then back take of Kamaru Usman in the first round of that fight. And then in the second fight, he clearly beat Usman, but it wasn't he didn't pitch some shutout. And it was also Usman coming back off of his first true loss. He did lose prior to in his career, but his first knockout loss, and Usman's older, he's got knee issues, whatever. Usman looked good against Khamzat Chimaev, but I think he definitely had more confidence in that fight. I don't think Usman looked very confident in that third fight with Leon Edwards. Colby Covington, he's a guy that's kind of been shelved for a while. The dude hasn't fought in over a year. It's been about a year, almost 2 at this point. His last win was against Jorge Masvidal, where he kind of, rinse and repeat takedowns. He got clipped up by Masvidal, hurt and rocked, and then he had all the legal issues go down with Masvidal. Prior to that, he lost against Usman. He beat Tyron Woodley, lost to Usman, where he got finished late in the 5th round, where he was up on my scorecards in that fight. And he, has an argument that he beat Usman the second time as well, where he kind of just didn't get going. Same thing with the confidence thing, I believe. Before that, RDA beat the piss out of RDA, beat the piss out of Robbie Lawler, beat the piss and left him in a pool of his own blood. His words, not mine. And Damian Maia. Colby Covington is a guy that he's not the biggest welterweight. He's got 62 takedowns. The only person in welterweight history that has more takedowns than him has 82, and that is the greatest MMA fighter of all time, probably. Who do you think that may be? The Canadian? GSP? So that's a hell of a stat to have, to be number 2 behind GSP, especially in modern MMA. Leon Edwards is much more of a back foot, circle the outside of the cage, pot shot guy. He loves head kicks. He's head kicked a lot of people. His head kicked Bilal Muhammad, even though that fight got stopped and finished via injury. He loves throwing head kicks at people. He looked good again. I really like what he showed against someone like Gunnar Nelson, even though that was back in 2019, where Gunnar Nelson is a grappler, and he was able to get ground position on him, hit him with elbows, clip him up. What worries me about this fight, if I were a Leon Edwards fan, is the Nate Diaz fight. Nate Diaz took a beating from him, and in the 5th round, Leon Edwards flagged. Leon Edwards flagged in the second Usman fight as well before he knocked him out. And at his pace, Leon Edwards can fight his pace forever. But the second someone ups the tempo on him like Nate Diaz did, he had a ton of success. Even Kamaru Usman just holding him against the cage, body punching him, taking him down. Even Usman had success in their 3rd fight. People that continuously push the pace on Leon will take the back foot. He will circle to the cage. Leon is a very dangerous dude in the clinch. He has great elbows. He has great kicks. He has good, crisp boxing. He's not the most powerful guy, but he can definitely ring someone's bell. Colby, on the other hand, is a much more of a high volume. He has great kicks. Leon Edwards has great kicks, but I think Colby's striking and his kicking game is highly slept on. If we were talking about a kicking game and a wrestler and Bryce Mitchell, Colby Covington, he takes that and you can multiply it times 10. Colby Covington, decent boxing, not a lot of good power, good kicks, great volume, will definitely come out and put his foot on the gas. He's a guy, and both of these guys are not very young. Leon Edwards is 32, which he's right, outside of his prime or the end of his prime. And Colby Covington at 35, he's right outside of his prime there. Both of these guys got a lot of miles. Colby is a career-long wrestler as well, a lifetime wrestler. In this fight, I could totally see Leon Edwards being the bigger fighter, defending some takedowns. But he has to force Colby into exchanges. And if you look at the Usman fight with Colby Covington, the first fight, Colby had tons of success just striking in the pocket with Usman, and he would cause Usman to reset. And if you ask me, Colby Covington is the reason why, not why, but Colby Covington definitely helped out Leon Edwards knocking out Usman, because Usman took a lot of damage from Colby Covington in both of their fights, especially their first fight. Usman would get rocked, he'd freeze up, and then reset and go again. And Colby, again, not a high power guy, but he has the ability to just keep throwing, getting on the front foot. I don't think this is an easy fight for either one of them, but when it comes to styles, Leon Edwards is not some magnificent back foot counter puncher. He's not a guy that can L-step, take a backwards L-step and fire a straight shot down the pipe. Can he hurt? Colby Covington needs to really, really watch out in the clinch with Leon Edwards. That's probably his most dangerous position in this fight. I don't think this fight is going to take place at kicking range if it's up to Colby. If Colby's kicking, he's going to be kicking at his range. Outside of that, he's going to be crushing the space, forcing Leon Edwards against the cage. Single legs, takedowns, back takes, submission attempts that aren't real submission attempts. Just Colby will take the wind out of your sails. And all the success Usman had grappling, I think Colby is not as big as Usman, but Colby is a better chain wrestler. Colby will go high single, low single, switch legs. He will cut the angles. He will go to double legs. He just has so many different takedowns in his arsenal. And once he gets rolling, it's a flood. Can he be taken down? Yes. Can Leon Edwards go out there and take him down? Yes. I just don't know if Leon Edwards can keep this up for 5 rounds. The Leon Edwards that flagged against Nate Diaz and got clipped and almost finished by Nate Diaz, the Leon Edwards that fought Kamaru Usman the second time, where, I mean, it's not a fluke. He set up a beautifully timed head kick and hit it behind a punch. But Leon Edwards is on his way to losing that fight. He looked good against Usman in their third fight, but still lost moments, still got taken down, still got controlled against the cage. Colby is very good athletically, insane cardio. And if Leon doesn't hurt him, it's just going to probably be a Colby Covington fight, in my opinion. I think Colby Covington is an underdog, is a smart play here. I think Colby Covington just puts it's fighting Colby Covington is like throwing 2 towels in a dryer. You are just constantly going. I think Colby Covington's going to go down there, and I think he's just going to continue to wrestle him over and over. Colby Covington's game is not built. It's not a Khabib wrestling game where it's pure dominance, pure crushing. You make one mistake against him. It's not like, look at Khabib against anybody where he's lacing the legs, getting wrist control, wrist riding, punching people's heads off. No, he's much more of a just chain grapple you until you cannot keep up anymore. And Leon Edwards, he's notorious for taking the back foot against almost everybody. And he has moments in fights where he takes the back foot. He's, especially if he gets tired, especially if he gets clipped up. If Nate Diaz can clip him up in the 5th round, I'm curious, after getting beat on and not pushing a pace, even if Colby loses the 1st round, he could go out there and put such a pace on someone. It's just, Colby Covington is a nightmare for anyone. He's a nightmare for dudes like Shavkat Rakhmonov. And Shavkat's an effing killer. Shavkat might be the best welterweight And I still think Colby Covington's a nightmare for guys like him. For as much of a crazy shit talker as Colby Covington is, with as much of a shtick as he has, he's an extremely calculated and cerebral fighter. I don't love his camp switch from ATT, but I understand why that happened. I believe he was at MMA Masters and Goat Shed now. Where do they have him listed at? So these still MMA Masters down in Miami. Give me Colby Covington to win a decision. And he'll lose a round. Might lose 2. But I think there's going to be 3 rounds of dominant wrestling against the cage. And maybe not dominant wrestling, but just positionally dominant, with tons and tons of scrambling and tons of rinse and repeat takedown attempts. Colby Covington never stopped trying to wrestle against Kamaru Usman, and he only had 1 successful takedown against him. Yeah. And what a world we'll live in if we have Sean Strickland, Sean O'Malley, and Colby Covington. There was a meme that went around before all these 3 dudes fought, and Colby Covington is the 3rd piece of this random parlay that someone probably has out there. Give me Colby Covington to win a decision. I think he rinses and repeats. I think he puts a pace on Leon Edwards. And I think once Colby Covington starts snowballing, it's an avalanche, it's a tidal wave. And I could see him drowning him. I could see him breaking Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards has checked out before. And I don't know if his coaches are going to be able to snap him into this in between the 4th and 5th round. Colby Covington, USA's got a new champion. He's bringing home the belt. Maybe he puts it on Trump's desk. Maybe he doesn't. I don't care if he does or not, but give me Colby Covington. Last card of the year, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into all the shows. I really appreciate it. I'm going to do a wrap up. Next week, I will do a recap of this, and maybe I'll grab one of the guys from Sherdog to do a recap with me. Maybe Jay will do it, or maybe Ben, or I'll try to get someone on to recap with me. And then we'll probably do some fun Christmas show, maybe. I don't know. We'll see what's up. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. There's a sign. Check the kick. Enjoy the fights.